Test. Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Amy Dodd Ennis. I'm the current president of Historic Brighton. And I want to welcome everyone today to this warm and lovely place inside from the wintry mix outside. So glad we could be in this beautiful space to celebrate today. Before I begin, just a couple housekeeping issues. Want to let you know, afterwards there will be a reception. Historic Brighton has a table. We will be accepting membership payments, and for those of you who are current members, you're able to renew at this time. And for those of you who are not, we welcome you to join our group. And also visit our website often. We have lots of information there. All of our newsletters, lots of resources on the history of Brighton, and lots of interesting topics. So thank you for your patience with that. It's been close to 10 years since my dad, Leo Dodd, the first president of Historic Brighton, left this earth. It's my absolute pleasure to serve on this board now and to keep his memory alive. He left big shoes to fill. Luckily, I have 6 siblings: Paul, Mark, Ann, John, Tim, Fran, to help cover his many tracks in life. Many of them are here today. I'd like them to please stand and be recognized. Come on, everybody. So who was Leo Dodd? I have a memory that sticks out and makes me chuckle. It's just an example of who he was as a man. There's so many things I could say about him. But this one just kind of sets a tone. One time when I was in high school, he dragged home an old dead tree. Somehow he collected it. I'm not sure where. I can't remember if he brought it up the street from Ellison Park, where we lived close by, or if he shoved it into the back of his Honda hatchback. But he brought it home and he planted it. He said, "This is a tree that I'm going to plant in our backyard in cement, in a water feature that he built for birds, to attract birds to the backyard." My dad was a bird lover. So this dead tree I looked at, and I looked at my mother, and the two of us shared a little bit of a smile. And I thought, why on earth would you take home a dead tree and want to plant it in the backyard? But we went along with it. He made it beautiful. He made the space beautiful. He made a little babbling water feature that would attract the birds, and thus his goal was fulfilled. Later on, and now myself, I take pictures of dead trees. And I love the beauty of dead trees. And I see the poetry in front of me when I ponder, oh yes, of course, birds love dead trees. There are insects and things within it. The wood is just so that you can, peck at it and eat it. He seemed to have an all-knowing sense of purpose about things, and an innate sense of preservation and wanting to keep things. So that's just one little example, but he was trained as an engineer, worked most of his life at Kodak. However, he was also an artist. He was a watercolor painter, a sketcher, a photographer, a printmaker, a sculptor, a protest poster creator, a bird watcher, a naturalist, archaeologist, historian, writer, collector, and so much more. We joke that he was a Renaissance man, but he truly was. Leo was a seeker of knowledge, of explanations, of expressions. He had a great appreciation for art, which would make him absolutely thrilled with the selection of Valerie O'Hara to receive this award today in his name. Historic preservation is a conversation with our past about our future. Through it, we can ask questions of our past and learn new things about our history and ourselves. It's an important way for us to transmit our understanding of the past to future generations. Valerie O'Hara and our previous recipients exemplify this in a variety of ways. Other people who were named to receive this award, so Valerie is the seventh, include Sandy Frankel, Betsy Brayer, Richard Miller, Mary Jo Lamphere, Richard Reesum, and Cynthia Hauk, all of whom represent different facets of historic preservation. I now welcome Beth Doty, past president and current nominating chair, to the podium, who will give some more background about Valerie.
Sorry, 5 feet tall. Welcome. Here we are in this glorious circle of color and light. When you enter a sacred space such as this, surrounded by beauty, you can be transformed. You experience through your senses and through your spirit that this is a special place. Stained glass was first used in 1144 for the Basilica of Saint-Denis near Paris by the Abbot Suger, who is considered the creator of the Gothic style of architecture. He wanted, quote, the most radiant windows to illuminate men's minds so that they can travel through the light to an apprehension of God's light. For 117 years, through 3 generations, Pike stained glass windows and Valerie O'Hara have done just that, creating and preserving a legacy portfolio of stunning artistry, enduring symbolism, and meaningful depth. And I hope that even if you observe different beliefs or are agnostic, you can still have a profound aesthetic experience by being here today to see these historic treasures. Valerie is the most artistic, creative person I know because she has applied her unique talents to the creation and preservation of stained glass, a centuries-old art form. It makes her an especially deserving candidate for the 2025 Leo Dodd Award for Heritage Preservation.
Thank you so much, Beth. When Beth called me to tell me about this, she said I could invite anybody I wanted, and that's why you're here, and I thank you so much for coming. And she said I could have it anywhere I wanted, and so I had to have it at Third Presbyterian Church because this congregation is a model of stewardship. They care for their historic art and their buildings. And this particular building is the 5th home of a congregation and community that started in 1827. The 4th building is where Charles Finney challenged the congregation to practice a faith that made a difference in society. He has a plaque right on East Avenue between the chapel and this sanctuary. Today, you'll see many of the window designs commissioned over the years reflect that mission. That is one of the themes that are woven into these windows. So I'm going to be exploring the themes of victory, the theme of the extraordinary lives of some of the donors, and the individuals who are honored in these windows, plus the artists who made them. There are over 100 stained and leaded glass windows throughout this 3-building complex, and about 36 of them are here in this sanctuary. They've been made by 7 different companies, and all of these companies are American, which is unusual because the majority of them were made between the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, when European competition was severe. These windows were made between 1893 and 1976. And the earliest ones, if you grab your colored sheet here. On the top left corner, these two windows are facing me. I'm going to try not to give you too much whiplash today, but you can't really see them as well as I can. These were done by the Page and Chapin Company, which was a local company, at a time when religious and artistic reassessment and revival caused the austere churches of the beginning of the 1800s to blossom into the opulence that you see in these designs. So one of the themes that I'm going to talk about is the extraordinary lives, or at least career choices, of some of the artists that have made these windows. So the artist of these two windows was originally a clerk locally for a wholesale grocer. Then he worked for several years as a shoe manufacturer before deciding to make stained glass windows in 1891. How do you just decide? Anyway, his work can also be found at Presbyterian Church, which is now the Downtown United Presbyterian Church, the Chamber of Commerce building, and two of the fraternity houses at Cornell University. So these are high Victorian windows, and the Victorian designers of stained glass just love to push the envelope with their sheer number of pieces per square foot, the size of the pieces, and the delicacy of the lead. Initially, in the 1880s and 90s, the designs were decorative, but artists like Louis Tiffany soon created windows that included landscapes and figures. Windows 2 to 5, which are the 4 in the middle on this side, are all Tiffany windows made between 1893 and 1903. Tiffany was the son of the jewelry company, Tiffany & Company, and studied under the painter George Inness in the US and Leon Bailey in Paris, where he was exposed to Impressionist paintings. By 1878, it's not that well known that he was one of the better known painters in the country, exhibiting with well-known artists such as Thomas Eakins and John Singer Sargent. He continued to paint until the end of his career, but he yearned to reach a wider audience that he felt painting cannot do. At this time, there was a wide concern of artists and architects for the applied arts in general. In 1885, he founded the Tiffany Glass Company, and the explosion of church building in the US provided the newly found School of American Glass with a flood of commissions. So most people think of it as Tiffany glass, but us in the industry call it the School of American Glass and or opalescent glass. So this particular kind of glass is the most identifying characteristic of this movement. So before this, the glass that was used was fairly transparent, at least translucent, and all of the details were painted onto the surface of the glass and fired in. So even though the glass on the far two windows, the 1 and 6, God, they look so dark today, sorry. They are more in the American Gothic style, but the Tiffany windows are not only done with opaque glass, they tried to not paint at all on the glass to get the details. So the only paint that you would see, and it's just like ceramic paint, is in the faces and hands. So all of the other details you see were developed and made in the molten process of making the glass itself. They also did a lot of layering. So some of these windows, they don't show it from the inside, but on the outside, you can see different areas have different layers that were plated, one on top of the other. So one of the things that you notice is the third window is brighter than all the others. Unfortunately, the church had a fire, and if you look over, there's one stone that we left uncleaned after the fire, so you could see where the soot would have gotten not only behind the windows, but in between every single layer. And the only way you can clean that is to take them completely apart and put them all together like a 3D puzzle. And that's why that particular one is cleaner, because that's one that has been completely re-leaded. So one of the reasons it's difficult to figure out is it a Tiffany or is it any other artist in that movement is, number one, Tiffany's are almost always signed. But also, a lot of the artists that worked for Tiffany moved around in different companies, and some of them founded their own company. One of the artists that was most responsible for all the landscapes, so that would be number 2 and number 5, is Agnes Northrop. And at this time, the idea of using a landscape in a religious setting was completely original, but also completely revolutionary. The possibility of a devotional side of landscape imagery did create some controversy. And if you look at windows 3 and 4, again, these middle 2 Tiffany's, a lot of artists reference old master paintings when they're developing ideas. So the third one is based on a painting by Paolo Veronese in 1570 of the Vision of St. Helen. And the next one is from a 1619 painting of St. John of Patmos, which same as St. John the Evangelist, by Velázquez. And I don't know if you want to crank all the way around up in the balcony, that's number 28 in the middle. That is based on a painting called The Vale of Tears by Gustave Doré, painted in 1883. That is not a Tiffany. That was done by Redding Baird and Company in 1893. And they were from Boston, and at one point, around 1885, they were the largest stained glass studio in this country. Other artists who designed for Tiffany were David Maitland Armstrong, Jacob Holzer, and Frederick Wilson, and all 3 of them are represented in this sanctuary. You can see the differences between the artists, even though they're in the Tiffany studio. It was Jacob Holzer, who was the first one besides Tiffany to do the faces. So you can tell the difference because this one up here, which is number 25 in the middle, you see the face is a lot wider than number 30 on my right, so the left hand of those 3 windows, which was done by Frederick Wilson, and it's just the different styles of the way these artists portrayed the human face. So look for that style in places like Downtown United Presbyterian Church and Christ Church and St. Paul's Church right here on East Avenue. There is also another Jacob Holzer window in the chancel at the at the Church Home Chapel on Mount Hope Avenue. Frederick Wilson eventually left the Tiffany Studios to work for Judson Studios in California, for whom he designed the windows at Garrett Chapel on Bluff Point in Keuka Lake. And you can see, if you've been there, it's a completely different style, because by that time, in 1929, that American opalescent style became out of style, and artists were turning to the more American Gothic style. So we're doing a full circle. The American Gothic style artists were inspired by those 12th century stained glass windows that Beth spoke about. There's another theme that's throughout these windows, and that is of victory. And we were just over here at window 30. That carries the theme. It was given in memory of parishioner Horace Loomis, and at the dedication, it was said, and I paraphrase, that there was about him an upliftedness, a loftiness of spirit. The pull of his life was upward, and those who knew him feel it still. And you can see the upward lift in the face in that window. Window number 32, which is the last one on the right there, was made in 1910 by David Maitland Armstrong, and that depicts St. Paul, whose life is considered an example of victory, as he endured great suffering but still rejoiced in his faith. The sword that he's holding is a symbol of the Bible, and in the open book, it's quoted, "The sword is the spirit of the word of God," which is from Ephesians. Armstrong is another artist who had a very varied career. He was a lawyer who passed the bar in 1862 And he was the American consul to Rome between 1869 and 1873, where he met many well-known artists at the time doing their European tour. He then decided to become an artist. Just how do you... Anyways, I'll never be a lawyer, just so you know. Then, he worked with Tiffany, John Lafarge, and Auguste Saint-Gaudens before founding his own company in 1887. His daughter Helen, an artist in her own right, later joined the firm, and they have fabulous examples of their work at All Souls Church in Asheville, North Carolina, Faith Chapel on Jekyll Island in Georgia, and the Appellate Court Building and the Church of the Ascension in New York City, where he was a parishioner. And back to window 25, the laurel wreath that the angel is holding is traditionally also a symbol of victory, achievement, and honor. And then moving to these 6 here in the east transept, windows 18 to 23 on your floor plan. These were made after our victory in World War I, and they honor 5 fallen soldiers from this parish. Designed by Pike Stained Glass in 1922, they reflect, again, this is now the more popular American Gothic movement. And it was led by architects like Ralph Adams Cram. While evoking a medieval design sense, the symbols are very modern, reflecting the time in which these windows were made and reflecting all of the victors of World War I. So they're so chock full of symbolism that I'm just going to go through from left to right. You have St. George, St. Michael, St. Paul as a Christian warrior, the angel of peace after battle, St. Gabriel, and the last one is St. Martin of Tours. And within those, on either side of the figures, represents all of our allies. So on the left, there's the English flag and coat of arms. The second one has the Belgian coat of arms and the Irish thistle. The third one has the U.S. Army and Engineers and the Medical Corps. The fourth one has the U.S. Navy, Quartermaster, and Signal Corps. And the fifth one has the Italian coat of arms and the St. Andrew's Cross of Scotland. And the last one on the right has the French coat of arms and the Japanese and Greek shields. You would not see that one, Japanese one, after World War II, though. So the inscription that's carried throughout these windows is from 2 Timothy in the New Testament, which says, "I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith," which is the Apostle Paul reflecting on his own life as he faced death. Windows that are similar in style by the first generation of my family studio can be found, again, 1 and 6 on this transept, and also at Blessed Sacrament Church, St. John the Evangelist Church, and Sacred Heart Cathedral in Rochester, as well as St. Mary's Cathedral in Oswego. The next theme I want to cover is celebrated and distinguished parishioners who are honored in these windows. So window number 8, which is the first one there in the nave on the west side, is second generation Pike made by my parents. The story of Mary and Martha in the New Testament represents 2 different but complementary expressions of faith, the active and the contemplative. And both of these can be found in the life of Dorothy Harvey, who is honored in this window. Window number 9, a companion piece that made at the same time, features St. Luke the physician, which symbolizes the life of Dr. James Quigley, who was a pioneer obstetrician. Windows 10, 11, and 13 and 14, so they're the 4 in the back, were all made by Willett Studios in Philadelphia. They are still around, and they are on their 4th generation, I believe. Number 10 is in honor of an early pastor, Dr. Albert Hall, who is known for his love of children. I'm sorry, that's 10 and 11 is a pair, and that shows Christ with the children. Window number 13 is of Psalm number 1, and it honors the life of Lillian Alexander, who from this church led the effort to ordain women in the ministry within the National Presbyterian Church. In Psalm 1, which is, "The righteous man shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water," means standing tall against your surroundings, as she was such a pioneer. So the windows that were made by my parents, they would have been made between, 1948 and 1988. And both of my parents, talk about Renaissance people, my dad taught me woodworking, not just the stained glass, but photography, and my mom taught me gardening and sewing. And when we posed for the figures in the windows, she would make the costumes that looked like from that period. My dad would take the pictures, develop the film, print the pictures, and then proceed to make stained glass windows out of them. They both met when they were going to graduate school at NYU for fine art, and they both taught high school art in New York City before moving permanently to Rochester to work for my dad's uncle, Pike. Jim carried on the traditional stained glass window techniques while adapting them to the demand in the mid-20th century for contemporary designs. He espoused simplicity and a sense of proportion in his life and work, exemplified by his stained glass windows at St. Thomas More and St. Philip Neri churches, Holy Sepulchre Cemetery, all in Rochester, St. Rose of Lima in Buffalo, the chapel at Roberts Wesleyan College, and many, many more. They also designed the clear story windows. So all the there's 36 windows that go around the top there. And they illustrate the life of the church, which is service, study, and praise, the Presbyterian church symbols, and the history of this church in particular, including architectural details of the present and past structures. So when we're done here, you can look and see some of the first, second, and up to the fifth towers of the different buildings that they were in. So the Willett Studio, going back to number 13, this one is also very mid-20th century contemporary, contrasted with the one next to it, number 14, which was done 10 years earlier and still reflects that interest in the neo-Gothic, and you can see it's just getting a little more modern. They also made the window behind me in the chancel and all the windows in the chapel, which you'll have an opportunity to see afterward. So just to come full circle today, this window again illustrates the individuals who exemplified Charles Finney's concepts of Christian service. Finney himself is depicted in the center right medallion, right in the middle there. And then in 1976, I designed the last two commissions of new work here. The skylight, there's my picture, that is located on your way into Johnson Hall. This is down in the lower left of your flyer there. And then there are two skylights and a window in the columbarium, which we won't have an opportunity to see today, but that's behind the chapel. And there's a detail of that. The designs were inspired by the design elements of the first two windows, the oldest two. And again, that's a full circle, kind of in a design way, and using the same type of glass that Tiffany used, the opalescent glass. Since then, I have repaired and restored about half of the windows over the last 20 years. And we already talked about window number 3. But the 130-year creation and restoration program in this church is thanks to the congregation's donors, their dedication, faith, and generosity, their farsightedness and stewardship, contributing to this worship space and the community. So now when you look around, you can think about the lives of the people that the windows are dedicated to. and the people that donated them, and the artists whose creations translated the church's history and beliefs into lasting works of art. I want to give special thanks to Reverend Seegers and Reverend Bill Young, who were Bill Young and Janet Reed were my first contacts here. Elmer Dussman, Peg Rockfall, and Rachel Norton, if you are here, thank you so much. These are my contact people. Mac Bolt and Joey Besserell, who work in the church. Joey has to let me in. And Mac did their website, which is amazing. And he did this. And Dave and Julia Young, who had to take them all out and put them all back to get repaired. And Chris Grooms, who he works mostly in the studio, but he will go up on scaffolding with me. So thank you. I want to thank my husband, Jerry, who you probably met back door, and my best friend, Elise, who you probably met at that door, since we were 2 years old. And even Beth, I've known since second grade. And is your brother here today? Oh, so yeah, this is like Old Home Week and class reunion all rolled into one today. And I want to thank Historic Brighton for this award. Their work in preservation is so inspiring. And afterward, Elise is going to point you to the direction of Johnson Hall, where we have some refreshments for you. And anybody who wants to see the chapel, Jerry, is gonna show you where that is. And I want to conclude with the words of another prominent Presbyterian minister, William Sloane Coffin. I love the recklessness of faith. First you leap, and then you grow wings. Thank you.
And here is the Leo Dodd Award.
Oh, we got time, yeah.
Okay. My question is, you said you really got one thought. The window number 3 has been cleaned, the window number 4 has not. So number 3 looks like number 4 until it's cleaned?
If we had cleaned all the layers, probably yes. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but unless you take it completely apart, you can only clean so many layers, because there's even a layer behind the stained glass, between the stained glass and the plate glass. So some of these we did some on-site repair. Every single one of them we cleaned on the interior after the fire. But yeah, it is an issue if they're layered.
And that would be maybe over time?
Right, so a stained glass window, depending on the location, could probably be, it goes about 100 to 150 years before it needs major restoration. And it depends a lot on how much support it has internally and the size, especially the width. So these, because they are quite wide for stained glass, especially when you have multiple borders, especially at the bottom, that can cause it to be the one that needed the repair versus anything else. Hey, Doug. Oops. Oh, there's standing here. Where are you going? Why, you think you're leaving? He's so great. Anyway, question? Well, most of the ones that I have the photographs for are at St. Thomas More. And they had, Brighton, Historic Brighton had one of their newsletters highlight St. Thomas More, so you can see them there, or go to the church. As a matter of fact, I remember working on those clerestory windows in 1967 because I started when I was 10, part-time at least, and my dad would have me paint the borders. So that's just a paint that's applied to the surface just to give it some more depth in those background pieces. So he would make some and then I would have to copy them. So that was really my first job, is at painting on the glass. Oh. Well, you know, I did forget to mention that most stained glass artists are, and you have to make a painting before you can make a window. So that's the proposal. You have, and normally our paintings are watercolors because the light that comes through a stained glass window is from the other side, which is just like a watercolor where the light is coming from the white of the paper behind it. So it's the closest thing that you can use. So thanks for bringing that up.
You can tell from your beautiful outfit.
Stained glass. And I made him do the flowers that look like stained glass too. So yes. Oh, Peg, can you tell? Oh, Elmer, I can't remember the year.
When the fire started in this area right here, it collapsed. And the story is the police or the firemen were worried about a flash over, so they normally vent this place quite greatly. So one of our masters said, no, don't do that. But anyway, so getting back to number 3, I never saw that cross. It was so dirty. That's how.
Right, the condensation made the dirt drip. You'll see that when it's stuck in between layers. Well, do you remember the date? 80s. I forget. I mean, I want to forget because it was horrible. But they rose from the ashes again because that was the second fire. One of the other prior buildings also burned down. The one that was behind here, where you can see there's a display of part of the original wall. It's down by the bottom of the ramp. By the way, if anybody needs a ramp to go into Johnson Hall, it's through that door there. That's it. Thank you.